Didn't drive 400 miles for the open bar or the seating chart with my name spelled wrong. I came because some part of me needed to see whether 9 years had changed them, and it took my mother exactly 11 minutes to answer that question. She found me near the gift table, looked me up and down like I was a vendor who'd wandered in through the wrong door, and said it loud enough for the centerpiece people to hear. "And what is it you think you're contributing here exactly?" A few guests laughed the way people laugh when they're not sure if it's a joke. My father studied the bottom of his bourbon glass. My sister's smile went stiff under all that mascara. And the groom, her groom, the man she'd been about to promise her life to, turned the color of the tablecloth. He wasn't looking at my mother. He was looking at me like the floor had just tilted under him, like he'd recognized something he'd been praying he'd never have to. Then he half stood and said, "Stop, that's. But you can't understand why a grown man went white at a wedding until you understand what my parents decided about me at a kitchen table when I was 18 and how long it took for that decision to come back around. We lived in a beige split level outside Columbus with carpet the color of oatmeal and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of the lemon cleaner my mother bought in bulk. That's where it happened. I'd laid everything out on the table the night before so it would look organized. My acceptance letter, the financial aid summary, the gap I still needed covered. I'd practiced what I was going to say in the shower so my voice wouldn't shake. Ohio State. In-state. I'd gotten a partial Pell Grant and some loans, and I was about $3,200 short for the year. "I just need help bridging it," I said. "I'll work. I'll pay back whatever you want. I just can't get over this last piece on my own." My mother was peeling a clementine. She didn't look at the papers. She set a curl of orange rind on a napkin and said, "You're an adult now. Adults figure these things out." I looked at my father. He had his laptop open at the end of the table, pretending to read something so he wouldn't have to be the one to say it. "Dad." He glanced up for maybe a second. "Your mother's right, kiddo. It builds character." And then he went back to the screen, like the conversation had already ended without my permission. There was no plan offered. No, "let's look at the numbers together." No, "we'll co-sign a loan." Just that clean practice certainty that I was a line item they'd decided not to fund. They called it independence. They said it like they were handing me a gift instead of closing a door. 11 days later, my sister came home from school crying because her Honda was humiliating. She was 16. She didn't ask for anything directly. She never had to. She just talked about how the other girls had nicer cars and how she had homecoming photos coming up and how everyone would see. By that weekend, there was a newer Civic in the driveway, silver, barely used. My father called it a smart buy. My mother handed her the keys on the porch like it was a coronation. "You deserve nice things," she told her. I stood at the screen door and watched the hug. Nobody so much as glanced at the tuition bill I'd left on the counter, which sat there for a week before my mother finally moved it to make room for a fruit bowl. I tried anyway that fall. I went. I worked the closing shift at a grocery store and then picked up early mornings at a coffee place near campus. I learned to make a pot of black beans last 4 days. The numbers lived in my head all the time, this low hum I couldn't turn off. And then, in November, my aid got recalculated. Some clerical thing, a form, a flag, a recalculation of my expected family contribution that suddenly assumed my parents were giving me money they were not giving me. Just like that, I owed more and I had 2 weeks to produce it or lose my standing. So I went back to the kitchen table one more time. Stupid, maybe. But I was 20 and I still believed if I just explained it clearly enough, something in them would move. My mother cut me off before I finished. "No, if we keep bailing you out, you'll never stand on your own." "You're paying for everything for her," I said. My father did his diplomatic thing, the voice he used to sound reasonable while doing nothing. "We can't fund 2 college educations. It's just math." "That's interesting," I said, "because you never funded one." My mother's eyes went thin. Don't be theatrical. Your sister's situation is different. College actually matters for her. For her, there it was, finally, in plain language. My future was an expense they resented. Hers was an investment they were proud of. I went up to my old bedroom that night, and instead of crying, I felt this strange, flat calm settle over my chest. Because I'd finally understood the rule of that house. They didn't love me less when I struggled. They loved me only when I needed nothing from them. The wanting was what disqualified me. I withdrew the next morning, quietly. I signed the forms, watched my student portal go grey, and felt something almost like relief, like I'd shut a window before the storm could rip it off the frame. I packed what I owned into 2 laundry baskets and a duffel. My mother watched me load the car. So that's it. You're quitting. I didn't fully turn around. I'm building something that doesn't depend on you. My father came out rubbing the bridge of his nose like I was a headache he wanted gone. You don't have to do this. Then offer me something, I said. He opened his mouth. He closed it. The silence was the most honest thing he'd said to me in years. I left. I didn't slam anything. I just drove until the split level was gone from the rear view. For the first 8 months, I lived in a rented room over a garage that belonged to a retired math teacher named Pat, who charged me almost nothing and never once asked why a 20-year-old had nowhere else to go. I worked full-time at a property management company answering phones and chasing late rent, which sounds like nothing but turned out to be the thing that changed my life because the woman who ran the books let me sit with her during reconciliations when I begged her to teach me. I liked it. I liked that numbers didn't have a favorite child. A ledger either balanced or it didn't. There was no version of accounting where the rules quietly changed depending on whose smile the room liked better. So I enrolled at the community college at night and took accounting 1 class at a time, paying as I went. No loans, no cosigners, no kitchen table. It took me almost 4 years to finish the associates and then the bachelor's, working the whole time. I sat for the CPA exam in a windowless testing center in a strip mall, alone, and when I passed the last section I sat in my car in the parking lot and didn't call a single person, because there was no one in that family I wanted to give the satisfaction. I got hired by a regional firm, then poached by a bigger one. I drifted toward the part of accounting most people find dull, and I found beautiful. The forensic side. Fraud. Tracing money that didn't want to be traced. Finding the gap between what people claimed and what the documents actually said. I was good at it, precisely because I'd grown up in a house that ran on a story everyone agreed to believe over what was true. I'd been reading falsified narratives since I was 18. The work just gave me the tools to prove them. My parents came back into my life the way they always did. Only when there was something to extract. The first call came about 3 years after I left. My mother's voice was warm, easy, like we'd talked the week before. "We're so proud of how you've landed on your feet," she said. I waited because I knew the pause meant something was coming. "Your sister's tuition went up more than we expected, and we're a little stretched. We thought since you're doing so well now." "I can't help with that," I said. "Don't be like this. We're family." Family. The word landed like a coin dropped in an empty room. My father got on the line and did his careful, weary thing. "Anything you could spare would mean a lot." "To whom?" I almost asked. "I've got my own obligations," I said, which was true, and then I got off the phone and sat with the dead screen and felt nothing dramatic at all. Just the confirmation of something I already knew. Distance had rebuilt my whole life. It hadn't touched theirs. By year 7, I'd moved into the part of the field that doesn't make for good movies. The quiet, credentialed back rooms where money actually gets decided. I took a senior role doing financial integrity reviews tied to professional licensing, the kind of work where a single sentence in a report can clear someone's career, or freeze it for 2 years. People in finance don't fear the loud part of the law. They fear the examiner, who reads the wire transfers line by line and asks a calm question they can't answer. I'd become that examiner. My recommendation could send a file forward or send it into a review that swallowed careers whole. It wasn't power you waved around. It was power you handled like something that could go off. My supervisor was a woman who'd done the work for 30 years. On my first day, she told me, "Your job is judgment, not feeling. You'll find things people prayed you wouldn't. You write what the record shows. Nothing more, nothing less." I understood her completely. I'd been raised by people who let feeling override the record. I'd watched what it cost. My sister came back into my orbit through a tagged photo on a Tuesday night when I should have been asleep. A beach, a ring on her hand catching the sun, a caption with too many exclamation points. I almost kept scrolling. Then I saw the man's name in the tag. Marcus Hale. Something in my stomach went cold and precise, the way it does when two parts of your life that were never supposed to touch suddenly do. Because I knew that name, not from a family group text I'd muted years ago, from a file. Marcus Hale was a financial advisor whose firm was in the middle of a routine integrity review tied to a senior registration, a step up the ladder that required a clean financial background check. His file had crossed my desk maybe 6 weeks earlier. Nothing criminal. But there was a flag, an unexplained pattern of transfers, the kind of thing that's usually innocent and occasionally not. The kind of thing that in my world means you don't get a free pass. You get a closer look. Almost clean is its own category, and it's the one that gets the most scrutiny. I pulled the file the next morning. Same name, same date of birth, same man smiling in a headshot, about to marry the sister my parents had chosen over me. I sat there for a long while. Life has a sense of humor that isn't funny. The invitation arrived 10 days later. Thick cream cardstock, gold lettering, my parents' names printed at the bottom like producers taking credit for a film. I hadn't spoken to my sister in almost a decade. I hadn't been back to that town. I hadn't planned to go anywhere near it. But now it wasn't personal. It was structural. Because I was attached to the review chain on the man she was about to marry, and the ethics of my job didn't allow me to pretend I wasn't. Neutrality doesn't mean you disappear. It means you stay present without letting yourself be corrupted, and then you remove yourself the second a conflict appears. So the morning after I got that invitation, I went to my supervisor and I disclosed everything. The relationship, the file, all of it. I requested formal recusal from Marcus Hale's review in writing. It was granted by end of day. My name came off his file before I'd even decided whether I'd go to the wedding. I went. I told myself it was for closure, and maybe a small part of it was for the satisfaction of walking in as myself, not the version of me they'd written off. I wore a dress, not a costume, but I carried myself like the person I'd actually become, and that turned out to be enough. The venue was exactly what my mother would pick. A restored barn with chandeliers hung from the rafters, twinkle lights, a string trio, the whole tasteful and slightly desperate performance of a family that wanted everyone to know they'd done well. Heads turned when I came in. Whispers. My mother spotted me by the gift table within minutes, and her face didn't soften into anything. Just that flicker of irritation, like an old bill she thought she'd already paid had shown up in the mail. "And what is it you think you're contributing here exactly?" The scattered laughter, my father going still, my sister's frozen smile, and the groom going white as paper. Not because of the insults, because he'd just placed my face. His champagne flute slipped and broke against the floor, and the string trio kept playing for 2 more bars before someone realized the room had changed. He stared at me, then at my mother, then back at me, and I watched the exact moment the math finished in his head. This wasn't his fiancée's estranged sister. This was a name from a file. He stood up so fast his chair scraped. "Stop," he said to my mother, and his voice cracked on it. Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" My mother blinked, thrown for the first time in my memory. And the groom, white-faced, said the words that took the floor out from under everything my parents had spent 9 years building. This is Helena Holt. A beat. She's the examiner on my registration review. Another beat quieter, like he could hear his own future tilting. She's part of what decides whether I keep my license. The air went out of the room. My mother's colour drained. My father's glass shook in his hand. My sister looked at me like I was a stranger who'd been wearing her sister's face. And for the first time in my life, my parents looked at me without contempt. They looked at me with fear. I didn't say anything. I think the stillness unsettled them more than any speech could have. People expect anger. They expect gloating, or at least a flash of triumph. They know what to do with noise. They have no idea what to do with someone who simply stands there and lets the truth take up space. The groom was breathing hard. My sister looked from his face to mine, confusion sliding into something closer to dread. My mother recovered first because being embarrassed has always been the thing that wakes her survival instinct. "Oh, please," she scoffed, brittle. "Don't make a scene at your sister's wedding." The groom turned on her, and there was nothing deferential left in him. "I'm not the one making a scene." Then to my father, who'd stepped forward with his palms up, peacemaker mode arriving a full decade too late. "Sir, with respect, this isn't something we smooth over." My sister's voice came out thin. "What is happening?" I looked at her and at the man she'd chosen, and I said the only thing that mattered. "I think we should talk somewhere that isn't the middle of your reception." The groom nodded before I'd finished the sentence. My mother snapped, "No. Whatever this is, you can say it right here." Fear wearing the costume of defiance. I held her eyes until she was the one who looked away, and then I walked toward the side room off the main hall, and they followed me like I was the one who'd called the meeting. He shut the door softly behind us. My sister stayed near it, pale, hugging herself. My parents stood close together, a unit formed by crisis instead of love. The groom spoke first. "I swear I didn't know you two were related." "I know," I said. "I removed myself from your file the week the invitation came. You're not in any trouble because of me. I made sure of it before I ever set foot in that town." My sister's voice broke. "You're reviewing him? You can affect his career?" "Not anymore. I recused myself the moment I knew. That's the whole point. I didn't come here to touch your life." My mother's face had gone tight and calculating. "Then why come at all? Why now after 9 years dressed up like some kind of statement?" I reached into my bag and my father flinched. Old reflex, old expectation that I was about to make a scene. I just set a thin folder on the table. My sister stared at it like it might be radioactive. "What is that?" "It's my financial aid record," I said, "from the year I left school." My mother rolled her eyes. "That's ancient history." "No," I said, and I opened it and slid out the second page. "Some of it's still active. There's an open question on it. There has been for 9 years. My father leaned in and the blood left his face. He recognized his own signature, dated the same fall I'd withdrawn, on a federal aid verification form. A form that claimed, in writing, certified federal, that my parents were providing me with ongoing financial support. Support I had never received. The same support figure that had bumped my expected family contribution up and quietly tanked my aid eligibility. Money on paper, flowing to me, that had in reality been freeing up the household budget for a silver Civic and a fully funded education for the daughter they'd chosen. "That's not what that was," my father said, and his voice had gone hoarse. "You certified to the Department of Education that you were supporting me," I said. "You weren't. You misrepresented it on a federal form. That moved my aid the wrong direction and gave you room to fund her." "Why would we do that?" my mother said, but her voice had thinned out. "Because you didn't want to carry 2 of us," I said, "and one of us was already the kind you'd written off." My sister made a small sound, like the air had been pushed out of her. My father sat down heavily in a chair that wasn't meant to hold a man falling apart. The groom said, very quietly, almost to himself. Oh my God. Because real reckoning isn't shouting. It's timing. And a piece of paper that no one in the room can talk their way around. For a moment, nobody spoke. Shock has weight. It presses people down before it lets them say anything. My sister was the first to surface. That can't be right, but she said it the way you say something you already know is true, hope sprinting to outrun the evidence and losing. My father kept staring at the form like it might rearrange itself into something forgivable. There must have been a Mearded, he murmured. I didn't understand half of what those forms. You signed it, I said. And then you spent 9 years telling everyone I quit because I couldn't handle it. The groom looked between all of us. He worked in money. He understood exactly what a certified federal misrepresentation was. This isn't nothing, he said carefully. Aid fraud on a federal form that's not a clerical thing. That's serious. Don't be dramatic, my mother snapped, but the snap had no power left in it. Ma'am, the groom said, and his voice was flat and tired. I've spent my whole career around compliance. I know what documentation like this means. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being accurate. My sister turned to my parents. Her hands were shaking the bouquet. Did you do this? Tell me right now. Did you take her aid? My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it. I trusted your mother to handle the paperwork, he finally said, which was the most honest cowardice I'd ever heard from him. Oh, for God's sake, my mother said. Mom. My sister's voice tore out of her, raw, nothing rehearsed about it. I am asking you a direct question. My mother's eyes flashed, then flickered, then hardened into the thing I'd known my whole life. We did what we had to do, she said. My sister recoiled like she'd been slapped. There it was. No apology, no denial, just justification, served cold. At your own daughter's expense, the groom said, almost in wonder. She left, my mother said. I left after you sealed every other door, I told her. My voice didn't rise. That, more than anything, seemed to unsteady them. They knew how to fight someone who was yelling. They didn't know what to do with someone who'd stopped needing anything from them years ago. My sister was crying openly now, the careful makeup gone. My father looked 20 years older than he had at the gift table. The groom dragged a hand down his face. Why didn't you ever tell me? My father said. And he was crying too, a grown man undone by something arriving a decade too late to be useful. I almost smiled. Not warmly, just tired. Would you have listened? You couldn't even look up from your laptop when I asked you to my face. He had no answer. The silence answered for him. So now you're the victim, my mother said, scrambling for higher ground. No, I said. I'm not the victim, and I'm not here for revenge. I'm just the consequence. And the word landed in the room and stayed there. Because somewhere underneath all her defenses, even my mother knew it was true. I gathered the papers back into the folder, slow, unhurried. The groom said, I'm sorry for not knowing. For all of it. It was never your job to know, I told him. You didn't deserve any of this, he said. I looked at him for a second. No, I said, but I outlasted it. My sister followed me outside. The cold was sharp and honest. The first honest thing I'd felt all night. She'd taken off the veil and her face was bare and wrecked. Why didn't you hate me? She asked. The question caught me off guard. I did, I said, because she deserved the truth. For a long time. She nodded, taking it without flinching, which was new for her. But not forever, I added. I didn't know, she whispered. They told me you just couldn't hack it. That you got overwhelmed and bailed. I was a teenager. I believed them. I spent years thinking you abandoned us. And I spent years understanding why I had to go, I said. Those aren't the same thing. No, she said. They're not. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. He wants to postpone the wedding. Marcus, I don't even know who I am right now. You're someone who got loved unfairly, I said, in your favor. That's its own kind of weight to carry, but you get to decide what you do with it now that you know. She looked at me for a long time, and for the first time since we were little kids, there was no competition in her eyes. Just grief. Did you come here to destroy this? No, I said. I recused myself from his file. I went out of my way to make sure I had no power over his career before I ever drove up here. I came because lies don't stay buried forever, and because he was about to build a marriage on top of a story that wasn't true. He deserved to know what kind of family he was marrying into. So did you. Through the tall windows, I could see the groom standing in front of my parents, his posture polite but utterly closed, the way you stand near people you've decided you'll never trust again. My mother was gesturing, defensive. He wasn't reacting. My father just sagged. The fallout came in pieces over the next year, and almost none of it because of me. That's the part people don't understand about consequences. Once a federal misrepresentation is documented and lands in front of the right office, it doesn't need a vendetta to keep moving. Universities audit. The Department of Education has a process. Paper has a memory longer than any family. My parents hired a lawyer. My mother called it a witch hunt. My father aged a decade in a season. There was no courtroom drama, no handcuffs. This isn't television. Just restitution, penalties. The slow erosion of a reputation in a town where reputation was the only currency my mother had ever truly valued. The wedding was postponed and then months later happened anyway. A small civil ceremony, no chandeliers, no string trio, just my sister and Marcus and a handful of people who actually knew them. My sister had moved into his apartment by then. Their relationship had taken a hit. It didn't fully recover from for a while, but it held in that fragile, honest way that sometimes follows shared shock. I met my father alone once, at a diner off the highway, halfway between his life and mine. He looked smaller, not physically. Morally, somehow, like something inside him had been load-bearing and had finally given out. I should have checked the forms, he said. I should have asked questions. I should have fought for you. Yes, I said. All three. He nodded, and his eyes filled. I don't expect you to forgive me. Good, I said, and he winced. But then I leaned forward. I'm also not interested in carrying this for the rest of my life. Accountability isn't the same thing as hate. You can have one without the other. He writes me letters now, real ones, on paper, about nothing in particular. The garden, the weather, a movie he saw. Regret tucked between the lines like a language he's still learning to speak. I don't always write back. But I read everyone. My mother has never apologized, and she never will. Some people would rather go down with their version of the story than admit there was another one. For a long time that made me furious. It doesn't anymore. Because I finally understood that revenge isn't about forcing someone to feel guilty. It's about putting the truth somewhere it can no longer be denied, and then walking away free. My sister and I talk now. Carefully. Not as rivals, not as strangers. As two women shaped in opposite directions by the same broken house. There's affection there. There's distance, too. There's something that, on the good days, looks a lot like peace. People ask if I regret going back. If exposing it was worth the wreckage. And the honest answer is that I didn't go back for wreckage. I went back for balance, for the truth to finally stand in the spot where the lie had been sitting comfortably for 9 years. They handed me a word when I was 18 and tried to use it like a weapon. Independence. They meant you're on your own, and that's your problem. I kept the word. I just gave it a different meaning. Not abandonment, not exile. Self-respect that doesn't wait for anyone's permission. And if you've ever been the child a family decided not to invest in, I hope you hear me when I say the ledger does eventually balance, sometimes years late, sometimes in a room full of chandeliers, but it balances. The record always outlasts the story they told about you. What strikes me now, years out from that barn full of chandeliers, is how predictable the whole thing was once I stopped expecting it to be fair. My parents made a choice at a kitchen table, and choices have a way of compounding quietly. Like interest you don't notice until the statement arrives. They thought a signature on a federal form was a small thing. It wasn't. Every door they shut on me pushed me toward a different door, and the one I finally walked through happened to lead straight back to their reckoning 9 years later. That isn't fate. That's just what happens when you build a life on a lie and assume nobody will ever read the fine print. I think about my father a lot. The thing that undid him at that diner wasn't anger at being caught. It was the dawning understanding that he could have done the right thing at any moment and chose comfort instead, over and over, until the comfort calcified into cowardice. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because I learned from watching him that the small refusals to do what's right are never small. They are the whole story, told slowly. The reason I could put that folder on the table without shaking was that I had spent 9 years refusing to become the kind of person who looks away from the truth because it's inconvenient. That was the first thing I had to build, before the career, before any of it, the simple refusal to lie about what was real. The second thing was harder because it can't be willed into existence overnight. When I sat in that windowless room learning to reconcile ledgers, I was teaching myself to think clearly under conditions designed to confuse me. I got good at forensic work because I'd grown up decoding a household that ran on a flattering fiction, and I decided to turn that into a skill instead of a wound. Clear thinking is a kind of self-respect. It's how I made sure that when I finally faced my mother, I had evidence, not just feelings. And the third thing, the one I'm proudest of, is that I kept going during the years no one was watching and no one was clapping. The mornings I made coffee before sunrise and studied accounting after closing shifts. Nothing about that was cinematic. Marcus saw the finished version of me at that wedding. He never saw the part that mattered, which was the dull, stubborn refusal to quit on myself. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Tell the truth, even when it costs you. Sharpen your mind, even when no one rewards it, and outlast the season when giving up would be easiest. Do those 3 things long enough, and you won't need revenge. The ledger balances on its own, and you'll be standing when it does.